Welcome to the Ideal Investor Show. This is the podcast where we help you challenge your mindset and discover where you are. Tired of stories about other people's success? We can help you change your life, determine your time freedom point, and join us on the journey to financial success. Let's go. Hey, how is everybody doing after the long Labor Day weekend? I hope you all had a great time and had an opportunity to relax. And I want to say sorry for the kids that have to go back to school. And I'm sure there are lots of parents who are happy that their kids are going back to school. So today I want to talk a little bit about an interesting discovery that I saw recently on a map, like a chart of the map of the United States that somebody had put together, where they were looking at how much of the price of a property in the residential space, like a single family home or like a duplex, triplex, how much of the price of that home is actually what we need to pay for the lot or for the land, and how much is for the house, for the stuff that's on the land itself. And what was kind of interesting when looking at that map is that the places that we know to be very expensive, like, cities like Boston or some cities on the East Coast, anywhere between Washington, D.C. and Miami down the coast. So if you go on the West Coast, from San Diego to L.A. to Santa Barbara to San Francisco to Seattle, all the way, especially when you're close to the water on the West Coast, all these places have very high overall prices. And when you look what is the price of the land, it is also very high in comparison. So the ratio between how much you pay for the land and how much you pay for the house is making the land much more valuable than, if in comparison, the property itself. And I think intuitively we all know this, right? Like when you think about, okay, I can maybe afford a small 1,200 square foot, 2-bedroom, 2-bath house in the San Diego area that cost me $650,000. If I sell it and I take those $650,000 and go somewhere to Texas, somewhere not right in the city, but maybe a little bit outside of the city, I literally get a mansion with an acre of land and may even have some money left over. What does that really mean? It's an interesting thing because you can ask yourself, how much is the ratio between the price of the land and the price of the things, the house and other things like the garage or so forth on the land? That ratio, how much is that an indicator for cash flow? Because if you go back and ask yourself, why are we doing the residential real estate investing out of state using turnkey providers in the first place, is because we want to find places that we can invest in where the ratio between how much we pay and how much rent we can get is good. Now, obviously, if we can get $1,000 or $1,200 in rent and we pay $100,000 for a property or $500,000 for a property, then that ratio is either better or worse. So what we want to find is a good balance between the purchase price of the property and the rent. And the question then becomes, can we find that places where the ratio between the value of the land and the value of the house on the land is kind of modest? Does that mean it has good cash flow? And on first glance, when I looked at that map, I would say yes, that is a reasonable conclusion. But there are a few other things to consider. And the example that was given that really kind of impressed me is the city of Nashville in Tennessee. Because what has happened to Nashville is that it attracted not just people in the music industry, but other industries as well in the last 10, 15 years, which then in turn means if a city is attracting a lot of jobs, a lot of industry, then people start moving to it. And on first glance, you would say, well, that's really a good thing because we want people in migrating. We want a strong economy. We want people who can afford to pay the rent. But when a lot of people come into an area, obviously supply and demand get out of balance. And if there's a lot of demand and not that much supply, then the prices go up. And that's exactly what has happened in Nashville. So if you look at the surrounding area, if you make a little bit bigger circle, not just like 50 or 100 miles, but a little bit bigger, you will see that quite a large circle around Nashville has a lot of these locations where the ratio between the land and the price of the house is actually pretty modest and pretty good. And then you see Nashville sitting right in the middle with like a dark blob that says that ratio is not so favorable. Why is that? Well, because supply and demand got out of whack. So when you see a location where the ratio of price for land and price for property is good, you want to ask yourself, why is it good? Has anything happened? Right? And the ratio in Nashville went down because so many people moved there. The ratio on the West Coast and the East Coast is relatively low, for one, because they have such a high density in the population, and because those places have been populated for a long time. And if you look at the places where the ratio is not bad, then you want to look at what's the economic history for the last 10 or 15 years and what is the outlook. So the ideal combination that we're looking for to have kind of like an additional indicator of potential for cash flow is the economic environment good? Is the crime environment low? Is the ratio between the land and the price of the house reasonable? And if those things come together, then you can probably assume that you also have pretty good cash flow. So that's just another way to look at it, another way to ask yourself the questions when you do the due diligence for your next investment. And I thought it was kind of like an interesting little additional twist to say, well, maybe I can look at how much is actually the price of the land and how much is actually the price of the property. So I hope you enjoyed that. If you want to find out other little twists and turns in the whole idea of residential real estate investing, I would encourage you to look at other previous episodes that we had on the show. And you do us really a big favor if you download the show. I know you can also listen to it just playing it on the phone, but if you download it, if you give it a rating, if you give it a review, that really helps us, because it tells Apple or Spotify or Google or wherever you're consuming our shows that there is an interest, right? And so that would be much appreciated if you could do that for us. And with that being said, be well and stay safe, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.